Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Azarin. I'm the host of Elite Ball Knowledge, and I'm joined by Todd McGowan. Todd, do you want to explain a little bit about like what you do, um, who you are, etc.?
Yeah, I'm a professor of theory and film at the University of Vermont, and I write. But I used to write a lot of books about film, but real film theory. But now, recently, in the last 10, 15 years, I've been writing books about I don't know Hegel, psychoanalysis, political questions, that kind of thing. I co-host a podcast, Why Theory, too. Yeah, explores similar kind of issues.
Yeah. So like when you a lot of your psychoanalysis focuses on Lacan, rather than when people usually hear about psychoanalysis, they think of Freud. And I think to a lot of people, Lacan is a very like abstract, if they've heard of him, sort of like obscure figure. And you're applying him to like politics, right? And like how, our day-to-day lives. So, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about like how does that work? Like how could we possibly apply psychoanalysis to politics and whatnot?
Well, I think there's a couple issues. So one, I think the main discovery of psychoanalysis is the unconscious, right? And I think the unconscious, I think it doesn't get, we don't tend to think about it as being involved in political questions, but I think it always is. Like the reasons why people do things are maybe always unconscious reasons. And so that I think is really important and can be helpful. And then I think I think the main thing for me and Lacan in politics and I think it's there in Freud too. It's Lacan emphasizes a little bit more this idea of enjoyment. Lacan, that sometimes people just don't translate the word jouissance from the French. And I think that really helps to clarify political questions in a way that almost no other concept does. That is, it really, I think, explains why people do what they do, what motivates them to do what they do, rather than, I think most people tend to think about politics in terms of power. And I think thinking about it in terms of enjoyment sheds a lot more light on it. So I think that's for me the main, so unconscious, but then especially enjoyment and that the way that comes from Lacan. And then I give it my own little twist as other people influenced by Lacan do. But basically that's the fundamental concept, I think.
So, for people who are like unfamiliar with Lacan and his work, what is jouissance? Or you're from my understanding, you don't like translating that word.
Well, I don't like not
Sorry,
translating,
not
I
translating,
guess.
not translating, not
Yeah, yeah,
translating.
yeah,
My
yeah.
bad.
I just think here's the only reason, just because I feel like it's a little jargony and
Yeah.
I think Lacan's jargony anyway. And so I think the more we can get rid of the jargon, the better it is. So it means, and that's a good question because, and this is why people that don't like it translated, is to think enjoyment just means, oh, having a good time. And that's not really conveyed so much. So the French word means a couple things. It means sexual orgasm. It also means enjoyment in the sense that we mean it. And then it means also the ability to use something. So you have the enjoyment of something. It's a legal term. So that's, I think, maybe a helpful starting point. But I think really what Lacan is getting at is what drives a person to do what they're doing. Right. So that's, I think, for him, what enjoyment means. And it also, it's for him, it's not, it's actually, there's a almost opposition between pleasure and enjoyment. So pleasure comes, and he follows Freud on this, comes from the release of excitation from, like we're feeling excited, overburdened, and then there's a release, and that's pleasurable, right? But for Lacan, what's more important than that feeling of release or 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 relief is the buildup of tension itself, which is what he calls enjoyment. So it's the way that you might say enjoyment is the way that we create problems for ourselves. And so that really, I think that you can think about politics in that way, it becomes kind of interesting to think
Yeah,
about.
and in your book, Capitalism and Desire, you talked a little bit about how capitalism, it sort of requires us to be in that state of constant, needing. The subject is constituted by that. Speaking of, I guess, desire, and we could talk about the death drive. How familiar are you with Brainrot and like just Gen Alpha, the culture of like stimulation? What is your like understanding? I mean, you're a professor, so I assume you're not, unless there's some really smart 9, 8 year olds. I assume you're not interacting with Gen Alpha on like a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I didn't even know what Gen Alpha was. So they're 8 and 9 year
Okay.
olds. Okay, so yeah, good. So I learned something from you. No, I don't have. I have twin kids that are graduating from college this year. So yeah, they're I guess they're Gen. I don't know what they are. Gen
They're like
Z. I guess.
Gen Z. Yeah, I'm Gen Z. So it's like 1998, I want to say, to like 2010. It's a
Oh, then
large.
they're definitely in that. They're right in the
Yeah.
middle of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I've heard this term brain rot, and I think it's interesting because it's tempting to say this is just an example of death, what psychoanalysis would call death drive, right? But I actually think it's kind of not really, because death drive it's not a desire to die, right? So it's a desire to, or it's a drive to create, just because it's tied to this idea of enjoyment or jouissance. Like it's the way that we create problems for ourselves. So I think that there's a way that constant, online constantly, social media constantly, whatever, brain rot, gaming constantly. I think there can be a kind of stasis in there, but it's not. I think it's a way to try to avoid that trouble of death drive, right? And so I feel like that's how I tend to think of it. That it's a way, like, how can I avoid this trouble that and I think that we encounter it when we are with other people, for sure. Like they create trouble for us, and also in romance. So I think it's interesting how, I mean, Gen Alpha wouldn't be involved in romances because they're too young, but
Well, some
how
of them
there's
maybe. I think they go.
maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, just from my own experience when I was 8.
I think the oldest Gen Alpha is like 14 now, so they're like just
Okay.
getting in there.
Yeah, we're getting kind of into the, again, not for me, but yeah, for the more precocious kids. But I think that there's a kind of turn away from love and romance, right? And I think that's, again, part of this same, that there's a disruptiveness to love and romance that people are kind of, it seems to me, shying away from.
Do you think that romance is dead, or what is your take on that, or is dying, or do you think it's just kind of shifting? Because I mean, my experience with that is very. I'm sure my experience with dating and romance is very very different than my dad's. I mean, for us, like, and Gen Z, our, a lot of like flirting and romance is done online, like getting to know someone. You reply to like whatever they post and you talk about it, and that you know I think is fundamentally different, because it's not like you have to go up to someone and like just like no balls, like, just like tell them how you feel.
Right.
It's you could kind of hide behind a screen a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really tell people how we felt
Well,
either.
yeah.
I mean, we tried to keep our cards close to the vest, or whatever that you say. I wonder how much it's different. And I mean, it's kind of, because I hear what you're saying. It's certainly a different form, right? That online is a different form than real life. But I kind of think you got the whole, like, what does the other person really want?
Yeah.
Are they into me, or are they not? Or,
Yeah.
so you still got to deal with that question of the other's desire. But back to your original query. I mean, I don't think romance is dead. So I teach a class. I mean, I've taught it once, but it's called Love and the Romantic Comedy. And it's 100 students. It's totally filled. I mean, almost all women, I have to say, like 93 women, which I thought all these guys missed out on a great opportunity.
I would have loved that class. That sounds
I
really
know.
interesting.
That's what I said to the guys in there. I'm like, what a good choice by you. But so and I wonder if it's more like, I feel like there is this kind of guy that plays a lot of games, and then, it gets kind of stuck in that world. And it's a much more, like, their social bonds in that world are much more homosocial, and not even homosexual, but just homosocial. And then, so they have not really that much experience of, I mean, if they're gay, that's a whole other thing, but if, like, reaching out to other people. And so I think and that maybe explains a lot of the imbalance in that class, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think when I was in college, if that class was offered, I wouldn't be 50-50, but it would be like 60-40 or something,
Yeah.
in the divide.
And I also think, to what you said before, you said that it's like a different format. I also think with the different format so I'll give you an example, right? When I talk to someone like online, like I play a video game with someone who I may not know in real life. When I'm talking to you and I could see you, there's a clear, even in person especially, there's a clear like turn taking, right? I say something, you say something back, and it's kind of like ping pong, right? There are, I think, different rules for like engagement and turn taking. I'm not sure what they are. I kind of have built an intuitive feel for them. I'd have to kind of really press on that to myself. But like when I introduced some of my real life friends to like the people I play video games with online and we all played together, I said, "Oh, so what did you think of them?" And this is like a common experience. I know, like, I've seen a TikTok of somebody who had like the same experience, eh, eh, of like people, um they were like, yeah, they were like they were interesting, but I didn't really know when to speak. And so we may not, if you were to throw, I guess the difference between Gen Z and millennials is that millennials grew up and then the iPhone got introduced, right?
Right.
We are socialized by the iPhone and by TikTok and by Instagram. Literally, like it's no longer like a different thing. It really is an extension of self. Like you go on my Instagram account and you could see a lot of like things about me, mostly that I'm really weird and like philosophy, but like like
Is
you
that
you
weird? That's sad to me.
yeah, I mean, like you go and you like look at the posts somebody liked and you could see like kind of what kind of person they are. So I think it really is a different, mode of engagement. Yeah, but there's different rules to it too.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. I mean, I really like that what you said about the way the pause works, right? Like when you're in real life talking to someone, they stop talking and then okay, it's my turn to say something. But I think if it's online interaction, especially one of these more instant, I mean, email's a different thing, I guess, but you don't have that exact sense of when to speak up. I think that's definitely true. And I think your point about the phone and the whole online footprint being an extension of you, I think is really true. It's interesting because people always, are getting in trouble or getting into conflicts because of their tweets or their
Yeah.
Facebook posts or whatever. And I just think to myself, why are you doing that? I just can't even understand why a person would get on whatever it's called now, X or Instagram or any of this. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it should because my kids are on it and then all the students I have do it. So, but it just doesn't, it's interesting because it just doesn't register for me. Like I wouldn't think like, oh, I should post that and tell somebody that I did that. Cause I don't know. I just wouldn't think
Well,
about it.
yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely like an element of anonymity on like even though like literally like you may be so aware that like what I'm seeing, yeah, like my future employer could see whatever I'm writing on Twitter. There's still a sense in which like, but are they really gonna look? And I think that's a very impulsive thing to do. I'm not like, innocent. I've said like stupid things on the internet. Not enough to get me canceled, but I've just said stuff that just like wasn't true. Or stuff that like I now like no longer believe. So, I think people want to share their opinions and they also don't want to get like have that real person conflict, but there is a risk, you're right.
Well, that's an interesting way to think of it, Mike. I like that it's a way to put out your opinion without the conflict. Although it does seem to me that it does occasion more conflict if you have this happen in real life. For one thing, you don't have so many interlocutors, right? You just have a couple, maybe one even. And online, you could have millions if
Yeah,
your thing
because you
gets
could like screen, even if it's like a private message. Like it's not like I'm going to be voice recorded. I mean, this conversation I'm literally recording, but like if we were having a conversation like in person, look, it's not like I'm going to be recording your conversation. I'm like, look what Todd said. Like, but if like somebody. And there's good and bad to this because like for example if a guy says something really creepy to a girl, the girl could screenshot it and tell everyone like, hey, like watch out.
watch out for him, right?
Yeah.
Right. No, I know. Yeah, there can be good things to it too, but it's just interesting that you're much more aware. It's funny that because what you said, I was going to say you're much more aware that everything you say is registered, but then you're saying actually you feel a kind of anonymity when you post something, and you don't feel that when you're saying something for sure, right? You feel like, oh, this is tied to me, like I'm people are hearing me say this, it's from me. And
Yeah.
it's not, I have no sense of my own anonymity when I say something. So that is an interesting
It's kind of like
distinction.
an intellectual like knowledge versus like an emotional, like we're sort of alienated from that emotional understanding of identity, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
so back to brain rot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What is so do you have an understanding of like brain rot as like a genre?
No, explain that to me. What does it mean? What do you mean a genre?
So it's this like there's brain rot as a concept, the idea of like this hyper stimulating, like looping, very like all over the place, like dopamine inducing hypersaturated content, or just any content that like you kind of just watch it and it kind of rots your brain, like, and I say that like jokingly, but like you scroll through TikTok and you just see like stupid stuff and it's funny. Brain rot as a genre is a little bit more specific. It's a little bit more absurd. And I find that as, the younger generations, like my generation, a lot of people have like a very absurdist humor. And that comes from like that genre of, for example, there's this thing called skibbity toilet. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No idea.
Okay, so it's like these toilets and they have heads and the heads say skibbity toilet, like skibbity, skibbity, skibbity. And to like my brother who's like 12, it's the funniest thing ever. Like it's like so hilarious. Or if you've ever heard of like 6'7", like people being like 6'7",
What does that mean even? Like one or half
nothing,
dozen? It
nothing.
doesn't mean
It
anything.
means
It doesn't mean
nothing.
like 6'1", half dozen the other? No.
No,
Okay.
I actually decided before this interview, I forgot about it, but I decided to write down, like I only did it for like a couple days, but to write down every instance I heard of brain rot, because brain rot is very like repeatable. It's very, you can like, for example, 6'7". 6'7" doesn't mean anything. It's just like I was on a flight back home, and these kids around 3 to 5 were just yelling like 6'7", and they did the little like hand motion that goes with it. Um, my friend was telling a story, and he said like he looked at like his text messages because it was like a story. I guess speaking of like it happened like over text, and he was like this was exactly 67 minutes later, and my other friend was like 6'7". Even people use it in contexts that are just like unrelated. Like my dad, when we were on that same flight, my sister was like, "Oh, look, we're 78 miles away," and my dad went 6'7", and so like it doesn't mean anything. It started because people took basketball clips of this basketball player who's 6 foot 6 feet to 7 tall, and there's a song where someone says the numbers like 6'7", and so then this kid, people started making basketball clips with that audio of the rapper saying 6'7" of this guy. And then there was this kid who went in front of a camera, like during an NBA game or something, and went like this, 6'7". So
And then it just caught on.
it just caught on people. It doesn't mean anything. People would just
Yeah,
say
but don't
it.
you think, I don't know. I mean, I understand that it's more easily disseminated
Mhm.
today and more widely disseminated, but I'm not so sure. Like it's really, I mean, what you're really talking about is what Martin Heidegger would call the they, or das Man in German, or what Lacan would call the big other,
Big
right?
other,
Like these are
yeah,
just like these are just sayings that no one invents even.
yeah,
No one is the author of them, but people just repeat them because they think this is what the big other wants me to say, that this makes me fit in, or this. And so I'm not sure. I think you're clearly right that it's much more ubiquitous today, but I don't think it's so different, from, I mean, people would say there were stupid things that we would say, that you would say, oh, that's brain rot. And people would say it, and they would say it all the time. But I think the problem is you weren't bombarded with it externally in the
yeah,
way you are now. And I think that, and as a source of entertainment, even the TikTok thing, I think is really interesting. I mean, I think the effect of it's pretty baleful, but I think it's interesting because it's constantly keeping your attention, right? And it's keeping your attention on something that's not thoughtful. Whereas YouTube is different because you can watch something that's really thoughtful on YouTube, even things that maybe aren't on a thoughtful topic, that can be done thoughtfully. So that I think I mean, that seems to me part of, back in the 1980s, this guy, Neil Postman, wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it's kind of, I don't think this is that different than that kind of thing. And so I'm not sure that, I think like the amplitude and the breadth is up, but I'm not sure the content is that different, right?
I think my understanding is like what makes the content different and what people say it makes the content different is that it's like when I say it doesn't have a meaning, it's not like it literally means something. It's like it's just a thing that people say. Like for example, like versus a phrase like "say psych right now," or like something that you could use in a particular context. 6 sevens is something you could just say. You could like just like there was this thing in my school where someone yelled it out in the middle of the test. Like they were just like I don't know. People will just, and I think that there's like I wonder why. I mean, you look at like after World War One, the surrealist movements and like the like people like caring less about what things meant. Do you think this could be a result of like COVID or something that people caring less about like the literal meaning of things and more just like it's funny because it's meaningless?
Well, I think there's always that sense of the like the enjoyment of the meaninglessness of something, right? Like that. Because I think that there's I mean, maybe COVID. I don't know. I don't know how I would connect it to COVID, but I think that there's a just the enjoyment of just speaking itself, right?
Hmm.
Like there's this notion of phatic communication, which
Yeah,
means
like small talk.
yeah, it's just communication for the sake of communication. It's not you're not trying to communicate anything. And that would be these would be instances of that, I think. Like there's absolutely no content to it. And again, I think this is makes me think of the big other and that like it's a meaningless speech that just is speaking through you and you're just kind of mouthing like you didn't invent it. You're not trying to say anything. What you're trying to get, and I think this is a key thing, and I think this is at the heart of a lot of this of social media. What you're trying to get is recognition. Like you want to find, can I say something that's going to get a lot of, I don't know, likes or a lot of retweets or whatever it is, right? Like that's what you want to constantly want to check the numbers and am I getting the proper recognition? And when I was a kid, recognition was much more amorphous, right? Like right
Yeah.
now you can almost quantify it. Like, yeah, I got X number of recognition. And
Yeah.
when I was a kid, it was like, I don't know, are you getting you didn't know. You kind of
Yeah.
were trying to had to try to gauge it.
Yeah, and so do you think that the algorithm sort of functions as like a literal manifestation of the big other? And to people who are maybe less familiar with Lacan and psychoanalysis, what is the big other? And like that idea of
Yeah,
like
I think
interpassivity.
yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I think that's right. And I think so the big other is a term I often use in place of it is a social authority, right? So it's not a political authority. It doesn't make up the laws or anything. It's not the cops, but it's a social authority. So it basically gives us the guide rails for what we can do and tries to and sets us up for how we can be recognized as having an identity, belonging in the society, etc. So the big other is the force really of our social or symbolic identity. Like it's what gives you an identity. So if you don't know, like if you know 6'7", then you know how to you're gaining a symbolic identity, right? But if you don't know what that is, then in certain groups you're not going to have any identity at all. You're not even going to be part. And that idea I think is really really important because the point is that you don't any kind of recognition that you get is always going to be there's an empty. And that's why the more you try to seek that recognition online or however, the more it's going to be ultimately dissatisfying because it's never going to be enough. And there's always going to be the sense that it's never the right people that are recognizing me, right? I mean, that's the little real bind with recognition, that the person that you want to recognize you is the person that won't recognize you. It's like that Groucho Marx joke that I don't want to join any club that would allow me in as a member. It's exactly like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how could we reconcile this with people who may not be like actively searching for recognition, but rather are just using Instagram Reels just for the just because it gives them comfort, the sort of like interpassivity?
Right, right. That's a good word from it comes from this. Do you know Robert Fowler? That's who invented that word.
I don't. I think I've heard it in Slavoj Žižek use it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Slavoj. I know Slavoj sort of appropriated it from
Yeah.
Robert, I guess you would say, but giving him credit usually. So I would just say that our desire is always our unconscious desire is always disrupting us, right? It's always causing problems. It's always disturbing our equilibrium. And then I think in order to seek respite from that, we turn to things like a reel and we think, okay, here I can find some equilibrium. I can just experience pleasure without the disruption. The problem is, without the disruption, there is no pleasure, right? So, or there is, and so I think finding this real that just keeps you in a harmonious situation would end up being very dissatisfying and disappointing. So I think it's, yeah, I think what people are doing when they do that, though, is trying to seek some kind of respite from their desire.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think like I do you agree with like the Buddhists in that like we should try to like, desire is what causes our suffering? Or like what do you think
Yeah,
about
I know.
that?
I agree that desire causes our suffering, but I'm in favor of that.
Oh, so you
And that's
so you
why I'm
think
not.
like, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I actually would agree. I think, yeah, like 100%. Our desire, like I like desiring things, like, and there is an enjoyment in like yearning for something, whether that be something that will
Sure.
never fulfill
Right.
us or something that like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, 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 yeah. So I agree with the Buddhist theory. I just don't come to the same, although Buddhism is so varied. But I don't come to the same conclusion. Like, I think you have to embrace your desire because that disruptiveness is really what makes you you. I think like that constitutes your singularity. That's what makes you who you are. So I think
like
like
the
the idea of
subject.
like getting, yeah, as a subject. So the idea of getting rid of your desire seems to me not a very, uh, that is not the step I would
Hmm.
recommend to people.
Yeah, so you're definitely not like a utilitarian in that in that way.
No, no,
No,
no, no,
very like
no, no.
opposite.
I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that for one thing, I don't think utilitarianism is even possible. Like, I don't think, I mean, I think one of the ideas, this is one of the ideas I really like and believe about psychoanalysis is that we never act for the good. And I think utilitarianism believes in a certain good and it believes, okay, we can act so we can have the greatest good for the greatest number, right? And I think, no, we're not, we're all, I mean, we were talking about death drive earlier. That's a way that we subvert our own good. So I don't think on a collective scale that you can establish the good either. I don't think politics is organized around the good, contra
Yeah, and
Aristotle.
like
That's not what yeah. So I'm definitely not, I mean, I don't think psychoanalysis is at all compatible with utilitarianism as a
And
philosophy.
I've heard you go like on the record say like you don't think psychoanalysis is like a science, right?
Right. For sure.
So
For sure. It's a philosophy.
what do you think like grounds its truth in it and makes it able to really say something that's valid? I mean, surely it's at least grounded a little bit in what like something real. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be able to make claims about the world. But what do you think gives it
Well,
such a strong explanatory power?
well, I think it the wager of psychoanalysis is that the unconscious is the driving force in our psyche, right? And so I think that now, what's the justification for that belief? That's your question, right? And I think the justification is, well, it has a great explanatory power for ways that we act that subvert or undermine our own
Hmm.
self-interest, right? Like I think without psychoanalysis, it becomes you end up being concluding in this like Noam Chomskyan manner. People are just deceived about where their real interest lies, right? But the problem is that you can tell people, oh no, this is what's really in your interest, and they still don't do it.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's not a, and one of this is a line from Lacan, like knowledge can't cure the symptom. Like I think we see all the time people know better and they still do a thing. And so to me, that's where we really get the power of the explanatory power of psychoanalysis really comes to the fore, because I don't know what else could explain why that's true,
Hmm.
right? Like, why is it that people keep doing something even when they know better, even when they know it's going to be destructive for them? Like, think about different forms of like eating habits, right? People know it's
Yeah.
terrible for them and they still do it anyway, right? And they can't, and it's not because they're physically addicted. It's not even because they're psychically addicted. They find a certain enjoyment in the destruction itself, right? And I think that's what psychoanalysis explains. And
Mm.
I don't think there's another philosophy I think of it as a
Yeah.
philosophy. I don't think there's another philosophy that explains that as convincingly.
Very interesting. I mean, do you think though, like with eating habits, right? We could say that like definitively, like somebody eating like a lot of junk food is not in their best interest, and it's something they enjoy. But I mean, at the same time, there are certain types of enjoyment where we shouldn't try to limit our enjoyment, right? When it comes to algorithmic consumption, do you think that, like, I guess as my generation would say, like, are we cooked? Are like are
Is cooked is a bad
yeah,
thing,
like,
correct?
are we,
Yeah.
like, is it over? Like, I don't mean that as in, like, literally, like, it's over, but, like, you know, are we going down a hole that will be very difficult for us to dig ourselves out? Should we try to do something about it, or is this just the natural course of events? Like, do you think, like,
No, it's not natural at all, and I think we should always try to do something. I'm completely opposed to cynicism.
so you're
But
definitely
a
not
couple things.
Zizekian in that way?
Oh no. I don't know that that's his position, but maybe it is like some kind of
Mm.
accelerationist, like just yeah, maybe that's his thing. Um, I don't know if he. The funny thing is about Slavoj, I'm not sure if he has a clear position that he thinks we should do. Right? Like I mean, he's much more concerned about the analysis
Yeah.
of what's happening
But I
than
meant more in the
about.
sense of like all. Like, I saw this clip of him, and he's like, "I don't accept any cheap optimism. Like if there's a train heading for us, if there's a light at the end of the tunnel,
Oh,
it's like a
I know,
train heading
right.
for us."
If there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it's an approaching
Yeah.
train. Right. I know. Right. No, I mean, I'm not optimistic, I guess. I mean, in that sense, I agree with them. But I would say you still have to try. You still have to
Yeah.
try to do things like that. And I think he would agree with
Yeah.
that. Like I don't think we're that far apart. But I would just say that the it's the act of like trying to do something even in the when you think there's probably no hope that's really that's the maybe the most important time to try to do something. And the other thing I would say is we don't know how things are going to go,
Yeah.
right? Like there could be like it seems to me like the large language model for AI is a dead end. I mean, I don't think AI as such is a dead end. I think there may be different ways to work it out, but I think the large language model is sort of headed toward a terrible collapse, and so that who knows what'll happen out of that,
Do you
right?
think
Like
we'll
I
get
think
something like Marx predicted, like, or some sort of like big, like revolution or something similar because of like,
no, I don't think. I think Marx was wrong about. I mean, I think his analysis of capitalism, I think, is great, like incredible. But I think politically, I think he didn't see two things. The way no one really wants to be part of the proletariat.
yeah,
They don't want to be. They don't want to identify with the proletariat. And secondly, that the natural tendency of capitalist society is to become fascistic,
mm,
not communistic. And he thought the movement of history is progressive, and I don't think that at all. Like I think we can do something about it, but I think the inherent tendencies. I think this is why if you look around the world, what's the predominant form of government? It's some kind of fascist or authoritarian order, right? Like I mean, I used to say, with the exception of South America, I was just talking to a guy in Peru earlier today, and he's like, "Nah, we're going the same way as you
yeah.
guys." So I don't think, I don't think that. I think that's the tendency. So I think it takes, yeah,
So you're not for like dialectical materialism in that regard, or do you think that
not in
has
that
its
way, not in
value?
that way. No, because I think I think history is much more open than that. But I also think it's much. I think this if you pay attention to the structure of capitalism, and this is I kind of wrote about this in Capitalism and Desire, the book that you mentioned, but I really focus on it in Pure Excess, which is kind of the subsequent book on the same subject. I think the natural tendency of capitalism is to degenerate into some kind of fascism. Like that's what happens.
So what is
And
the
I think
mechanism of that? I mean, like how?
okay, I have a pretty, I mean, I may be wrong, but I have a pretty worked out theory. It's in the second to last chapter of that book. Here's the problem. So capitalism relies on a certain fantasy that if I work hard or I invest in the right commodity, I buy the right, I achieve some kind of pure plenitude if I get enough things or if I get the right thing, right? Problem is, of course, you never get to that point. Even the rich, like Elon Musk, still feels more desire than anybody else, even though he has whatever $500 billion.
Yeah.
So what happens? Well, what happens is you have to find an explanation for why you didn't achieve that plenitude that the capitalist promise, the promise of the commodity gives you. And so the explanation is, well, someone stole it from me. And so for the Nazis, it was the communists and the Jews. Today, in most countries, it's immigrants, right? But it's always going to be, there's always going to be someone put in that position as they're the ones that stole this pure plenitude because they got something that I did. They got it easy. I didn't. And so then they stole it from me. And so I think, and then that's fascism. That's what fascism is. It's like, it says, okay, it's capitalism with someone to blame for the failures of capitalism. Right. And I think that's what we're seeing almost everywhere
Interesting.
today.
So do you think the issue with capitalism is exploitive nature, or is it more so that, like, regardless of whether or not, I mean, just because I assume a lot of my audience may not necessarily be anti-capitalist, or do you think the issue is more so that it doesn't really do much for us?
Yes, the latter, right? Like, I mean, obviously, exploitation, bad, etc.
Yeah.
Right? But if it like really produced like this great kind of world where we get, but no, it doesn't, and I think it doesn't because psychically, see, my critique of it is much more psychic than it is material, right? Like, it's not like, okay, if like 50% of the population had to suffer a lot and then the other 50% was really satisfied. Okay. I mean, we probably wouldn't take that bargain, but at least it would be reasonable,
Yeah.
right? But the point is, even the people that win lose under capitalism, right? Like Bezos feels more than you and me, Jeff Bezos,
Yeah.
more than you and me, that he doesn't have enough. Now, how can that possibly be? Like, that's just crazy, right? And so that's my main critique of it is a psychic critique, not a
Not
economic or a I don't know, political critique.
interesting. So then, I mean, relating this back to like the algorithm, do you think that like TikTok, for example, because TikTok's whole like drive is to generate profit based off attention with ads and
Yes.
everything? Do you think we'd have
Yes.
something like I mean, is this more of a cultural thing where we're just headed towards like people want stimulation, so they'll get more stimulation, or do you think like to what extent is that a product of capitalism? Like if we lived in a different
Oh, it's
society,
absolutely to me absolutely a product of capital. Like absolutely, like I think if we didn't live in a capital society, there wouldn't be algorithms, there wouldn't be this because the whole point is you never are under capitalism. You can never just be satisfied with enough,
yeah.
right? Like that is the crucial point, I think. And so you're constantly needing more, and that's what the algorithm's designed to produce. Like more watches, more likes, uh more people invested.
So I mean, if somebody's watching this like around my age and they're very much in this cycle of like desire, or even somebody like just like an average person who's in just the like regular capitalist cycle of enjoyment, um, what do they do?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. It's a good question. Like I think the one thing you can do is say, and I think this is the key, and this is I think again a psychoanalytic lesson that you have to see the way in which I think I'm chasing an object that I desire, but what I'm really enjoying as I'm chasing that object is the obstacle to that object, right? The obstacle isn't something I want to get rid of, but that's actually the thing that is crucial to my enjoyment. And I think that is an insight that kind of throws you out of the capitalist world because then you don't not constantly seeking more. You're like, okay, I have my obstacle. I kind of understand where I am and I can deal with that. Right. And that seems to me, that's a way to try to resist that constant, more, accumulate as much as you
Do
can.
you think that like accumulation of like you said like more, do you think that is like in part gives us meaning?
Well, I think it has the promise of meaning
Mm.
attached to it. Right? Like that's the thing. Like you think, oh, if I just accumulate a little more, I'll have a meaningful life. But then you never get to that point. I mean, that's the great capitalist swindle, I guess, to sort of
Yeah.
paraphrase the Sex Pistols. Um, that sorry, that's a way
No, no,
before here. You know,
we probably, I saw, you in an interview wearing a Led Zeppelin t-shirt, and I was like, this guy's great music taste.
okay, that's even slightly before my time. John Bonham died when I was 13, I think. So,
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's the swindle, is that you never get to that point where you really have the thing, right? Like you really get the satisfaction that's promised. And I think that's the to me, that's the worst part about capitalism. I mean, okay, yes, terrible exploitation of workers. Yeah. But the problem is that even the winners don't win,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Very,
you
very
know, that I
interesting.
think,
And
yeah.
I want to, and last question, a second to last actually, because I want to have one more. Do you think, like, what's next? I mean, like, where do you think we're heading? I mean, generally in the future.
You know, there's this great classic Marxist idea, socialism or
Hmm.
barbarism, right? Like if either we have the socialist revolution or we descend into barbarism. I wouldn't put it in exactly those terms, but I do think unless there's I think we basically are coming to a sort of a fork in the road, environmentally, especially, I think more than anything, between a collective kind of action that focuses on egalitarian, and that everybody has to be taken care of in some way. Or it's going to be a very increasingly barbaric and walled civilization, right? So like what we see in Israel with the huge wall between the West Bank and Israel, like I think that kind of situation, and then of course the border wall
Yeah.
in the south of the US, I think that those kind of walls will be, whether they physically exist or whether they just exist structurally. I think that will be more and more common, and then there'll be this real attempt to protect yourself from ever falling into the group of the excluded.
Hmm.
So I think that's already, a lot of that's already happening. But that to me, so that's why I think like defending the public sphere, defending like things that we do in common, that's why I think those are very important, because I think that's how we fight against that partitioning
Hmm.
of included and excluded.
Yeah, and I mean, like, on the internet, like, there's this disjointment. I mean, like, we don't really have a shared, like, cultural framework, I think, because the way the algorithm works is every person has a different feed. And so
Yeah,
this disjointing, I think, is much, people are, like, living different worlds.
I agree with that. And I think you're right to say, like before, you would have to go, like you'd see each other in
Hmm.
public, right? And you'd have to interact with people that you didn't agree with, and you'd have to talk to them. And now you can just totally, newspapers were ideological, of
Yeah.
course, but they were still in common. And so now there's no common, I mean, the only, in the US, the only really common news source is CNN, and that's like, no
Yeah.
one, no one
Yeah.
watches it. Yeah. I mean,
It's
it doesn't
biased.
even
Yeah.
matter. Right. It's biased, but even if it wasn't, I mean, it tries to be as neutral as it can, but if it wasn't biased, no one would, I mean, just no one cares, because people want their own little isolated news source. Right. And I think I think that's a really, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I think that's maybe that's the cause for the most
Yeah.
pessimism, right? That people are stuck in there. Like you have to, because to change, you have to be able to be uprooted and encounter something that you don't want to encounter. And that's what's great about being in public,
Yeah.
right? Like you ride a public bus, you can be next to someone that you just absolutely despise everything they stand for, and you got to still sit
Yeah.
there next to them. So that, I think that's such an important experience.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say, and I guess to end us off, to all like the Gen Z watching who may feel very like enthralled in this system and this like constantly feel the need to like keep scrolling and very in some cases to feel like a depletion of meaning. Well, what would you say to them, and what's your psychoanalytic read on that? Like, you know?
Yeah, stop scrolling. Like I feel like the meaning is an interesting thing, because I think the more that you seek it in like additional, more and more and more, the more you lose touch with it.
Hmm.
So I think like that to find meaning or to find significance in the world, I think you have to like pull back and say, okay, I'm not going to find it in more. I'm going to find it in less. And I think that's a really, or enough, right? Like those words are really important to me, like less, enough. Like I think that's a, you know, people you're talking about aren't necessarily accumulating millions of dollars, but there's a similar logic at work between that and we've mentioned Musk and Bezos. Like, but it's similar because you're saying I don't have enough of this of a certain kind of experience. I want even more of it. And I think refusing that is a really the problem is it takes you have to do it,
Yeah.
right? Like when I was a kid, you didn't have to do it because you just didn't have the chance
Yeah.
to have all that kind of excess, right? Like music is a great example, right? Like today, if you want to listen to whatever song you happen to want to listen to, you can just listen to it immediately. And when I was a kid, you either had to listen to the radio or you had to go down to the record store and order a single for
Yeah.
that, and it would take 2 weeks to come in. So there's a whole different kind of logic at work, right? It's much more, and I think it requires much more self discipline. It's funny because people say, oh, people today aren't disciplined, but I think it's the opposite. Like it was so easy for us to be
Yeah.
disciplined because discipline kind of came just de facto. And now I think it takes so much to be, even to like go to do your schoolwork,
Yeah.
right? Like it
So
takes incredible,
it's
so many
yeah.
other pressures, right? Yeah. So I think like that, I think, you know, this French philosopher, Alain Badiou, you probably know of him. Like he says this thing, he said, all we have, he put himself in the working class, although he was never really in it. He said, all we have, they have all the money on their side. They have all the cultural power. It's like,
Yep.
all we have is our discipline.
Mm.
And I thought that's a pretty nice, I like that idea that discipline can be a really powerful and important thing and a thing to fight against that onslaught of images and everything, right? Like discipline. And I think people already exhibit it in tremendous amount of it. Like I think even to my students who they have so much available, like they could cheat on AI very easily,
Yeah.
right? And they, and I was teaching a class and they said, don't even bother to give us a lecture on AI. We don't use it and we don't need a lecture.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's amazing. So I thought, and because they realized, okay, we're here at college. I didn't come here to just put an AI formula
Yeah.
into
Like, it's your money.
thing. Right. I paid money to learn something. I'm going to try to learn something. So that just, again, that struck me as like, that's really disciplined. I don't know that I would have been that disciplined. So I feel like that's something people should feel good about and should say that gives us kind of a path of action because there already is that discipline there and it should be fostered and developed even further.
Well, we're approaching an hour. I really appreciate you. I love this discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today in the podcast.
Micah, thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you. I don't usually get to talk to